The Marching Roundtable is proud to be an official media partner of Drum Corps International.
Thanks for coming to the Marching Roundtable YouTube channel, sharing great information to help you succeed in all the marching arts. While you're here, we hope you'll subscribe.
Of that could be, and so going a neon route with that, and white is always a great color for the performers because you can see everything that they're doing, and that's something that we take pride in. So starting with the white in the performers and then using those neon colors and textures in the guard costume then throughout the show was inspiring to us from a traditional Vanguard state.
As we started to circle around this concept, it was very freeing because it was all about trying new things and doing things in a different way and taking sharp left turns. So the real, circle to square was, how do we do those things? How do we take those risks? How do we keep people guessing? While at the same time doing the drum corps things that make people clap and make people want to watch it and all those things.
We all have done this long enough that I think we're beyond the point of we're trying to write things that we're guessing that people will like. And I think we're really truly tapping into stuff that we like. We like this show. Every piece that we picked in the show, I think, has an element that is special. Like each piece is different, but I think as we pick the pieces, it always contains something that pulls you in.
One of the things about this show that we were inspired by is avant-garde performance art, which is known for not having a clear narrative intentionally, so that we're able to go through the show not linearly, but be able to explore different places and zoom in and stay there for a while and then come back again, but really being inspired by texture and mood.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Marching Roundtable. This is Tim Hinton, the beast of the marching arts, and we're talking Santa Clara Vanguard and aVANT today. What an interesting, exciting show, again, from these master designers and educators. And so we're so excited that they're all here. Dan Morrison's here. Dan, how are you?
I'm great, Tim. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Thanks for being here. Andy Toth is here. Andy, how are you, sir?
Hello, I'm doing great. Thanks.
Thanks for being here. Paul Rennick is here. Paul, how are you, sir?
Hi, Dan. Good to see you.
I'm not going to mention how great your hair looks because I do that every time and it's so stupid, so I'm not going to say anything about it. Evan VanDoren, how are you, sir?
I'm great. Yourself?
I'm good. And Michael Gaines is with us. Michael, how are you, sir?
Great. Thanks for having me.
And I asked David Starnes, a good friend of mine, to be here to sort of ask some questions and be another voice. So, David, thanks for doing a podcast with me again at the Marching Roundtable today.
Absolutely. Thank you for asking. Looking forward to this.
So, Dan Morrison, thank you for sort of setting up this conversation, getting everybody on the line in the middle of such a busy summer. Thank you, everybody, for stopping. Dan, why don't you go around and just sort of make sure, I think everybody knows who everybody is, but just in case someone's watching and they're not sure what everybody's job is with the Corps, what part of the thing they do, could you explain that part?
Sure, yeah. So I'll just say it in the order of the people that are on my screen. We have Andy Toth. He is our visual coordinator. Michael Gaines is the visual designer, drill designer. Evan VanDoren is our brass arranger. And Paul Rennick is the percussion caption head, the percussion arranger, and the music coordinator. I think I got all those. And so super happy to be joined by these amazing, talented people today.
All right. Well, David, I'm going to let you go first. I will say I've only seen the show on video, which I can't wait to see it in person, but it's knocked out just by that. David, I'll let you start.
Absolutely. Me too. Just that, in terms of seeing it, it's been on video, but read a lot about it, in the off season and what you guys are planning to do. And Santa Clara has always been a trendsetter all the way back since it was the very first drum corps that I actually ever saw in my entire life in 1978 was the Santa Clara Vanguard. And you guys just continue to push the envelope. I think the show title is so appropriate, but as I watch the show, I'm really intrigued by a couple things. Number one, the way you play with space, not only from a visual standpoint, but also from a musical standpoint, and the way you play with layers and the void of props and set pieces, which knowing Dan Morrison's background and the wonderful Reagan bands that he had and how he initiated that, this could save a lot of people a lot of money if they went this route. But I'm just intrigued to know maybe your mindset and how you started playing with space and layers as you put this program together, both musically and visually?
Well, I'll say I can't take credit for not using props. That was a thing that everybody was on board with, I think, and excited about. So I don't want anyone to think I came in and was like, we're not using props, because that was not that's not how that went. But I think I appreciate that question, because I think that was a very intentional thing from all sides of design and how we approached what we were doing. And I certainly think that there are people on this call that can answer that more specifically than me. But I think I'll hand it over to Michael Gaines first to give a little perspective on using visual space that he does so masterfully.
Well, in terms of the props, I feel like this team in particular, we've had over the last number of years a pretty good track record of utilizing the modular props to, I think, pretty good success with that. And it was one of those where, as a team, one of the things that inspires us is to not create the same movie over and over. And so after 2 or 3 shows of utilizing those different kinds of modular props, we just wanted to do something different so that we didn't look like ourselves or look like anyone else. And ironically, to your point, the way to do that is to not do it. And I think that part of it too, when you mentioned space, I thought it was interesting in the question that you said both musical and visual, because that was part of, we wanted to experiment with kind of exploring a different artistic arc than perhaps, or artistic form, maybe is a better way of putting it, than perhaps a lot of drum corps shows, including our own, have been designed in the past. And one of the ways to do that is to switch it around in terms of the arc, switch it around, and also to exaggerate moments of space, whether that be music or visual. And as a result of that, you have a really unique kind of arc over time that allows you to create those spaces and take the time to create those spaces in that breath, both musically and visually.
Was it intentional for the arc of the show to be more horizontal than vertical? I never felt like the show stopped. I never felt like it had this kind. It always did this to me all the way through time. And it made it go really fast. In fact, I went back and looked at it. I was like, that's a short show, but it really goes fast due to the pacing of it. Is that an intentional move?
It is. I know that's one of the things Paul likes to talk about quite a bit too, in terms of just the way that we put things together so that it never feels like it's long. I don't know if you want to weigh in on that, Paul.
Yeah, I think we appreciate you noticing that. Honestly, our show is about 12 something. And it definitely does not feel that way. Like when I see it, it's always like all of a sudden the closer is starting, and it seems unexpected to us. So, and I think together, I should mention also that the 2 other members of the design team are Dave Isaacs and Sandy Rennick. And without them, I mean, honestly, it goes through a thorough vetting process, and we talk about things before. Evan will come out with a general skeleton draft that ends up being the result of a lot of conversations that we have. But a lot of stuff that interests me is like the percussion obviously can take a bridge and sort of connect it to the next thing. And I think if all of those bridges are different and all those are interesting, then that's kind of the result. Is the feeling is it just goes by quickly, and it naturally lands on the thing that was being bridged to, you know what I mean? So that seems like more of a natural occurrence as part of a bigger picture in terms of the show. And I think that's kind of the result.
Well, it reads that well, which is to you guys' credit of being intentional with that. Evan, I want to talk a little bit about your compositional techniques, because man, this is a new level, I think, for you. You've been a fantastic arranger, composer. But to look at this list of composers, Corigliano, Bartok, Schaefer, and how you've melded that genre to a point of still creating, a vehicle for the drum corps activity. But your techniques of tension and resolution, it's amazing. And your colors. I mean, I love what you're doing with timbre in this score, because you use a lot of high reference timbres and a lot of low reference timbres, and somehow that it works beautifully. So can you talk to us a little bit about your process in that?
Well, thank you for your kind words, David. I really appreciate it. First of all, I like the rest of us. We've all, I think, I can speak freely that we feel very fortunate to work with the team that we do. It's a very, very safe environment, very supportive that encourages us to take chances and risks and things. I am naturally a very risk-averse human being, so this whole process of exploring this program was both liberating and terrifying for me personally. But very again, because of the support that this team has for each other, it was something that started a little bit scary, but became more fun as it started to come together, if that makes sense. So, to your question, as we started to circle around this concept, it was very freeing because it was all about trying new things and doing things in a different way and taking sharp left turns. So the real, circle to square was, how do we do those things? How do we take those risks? How do we keep people guessing? While at the same time doing the drum corps things that make people clap and make people want to watch it and all those things. So it resulted for me in a lot of study of what are the component parts of things that we know work and why do they work, and then how do we take something new like the Corigliano as an example, and how do we take what that composition is and blend the uniqueness of that with some of the tried and true things that we know to create this celebration of avant-garde-ism, as
Yeah.
it were. So, a lot of exploration, a lot of drafts, honestly, a lot of waiting and hearing things live and seeing, does this work or does this not work? I mean, there was at least a handful of things that were written that we go to a camp and we hear it and we go, well, I know that's going to be performed better, but I think probably I need to make some adjustments here. And there's some things that were really surprising that were, I don't know, I would be surprised if this works. And you hear it live and goes, that is fantastic. I don't want to change a thing about it. And so that process ongoing and all the conversation is a huge part of what gets us to something like what goes on the field.
That's fantastic. I mean, I remember when the Star of Indiana and the '93 show came out, everybody was like, Bartok on the field. What? It was that whole media thing. Like, what do you do? And that stood the test of time. That show has stood the test of time. And I feel like you guys are in a zone right now where you are reinventing. I said this to Tim on an earlier conversation, but Michael Gaines, you have reinvented yourself. I mean, it's brilliant, and to watch the space that you create, but some of the duality that you were on the diagonals of duality, and the focus is still there, but it's just beautiful. And your staging is impeccable, particularly for the brass and when the percussion need to be. And I wish Sandy was here because, no offense, Paul, your writing's amazing, but I cannot take my ears off the front ensemble book. I mean, it is absolutely a percussion orchestra up there. It's just beautiful what she's done this year. So please pass along my congratulations to her. She's incredible with what she's done this year. I want to talk a little bit about colors, because the part I want to know more, if you're willing to reveal this, I'm very intrigued by the white and the neon green, and then what the pink symbolism is. And it's very cool the way you do it with the dots as well as the sleeves. But can you give us a little insight on the color choices?
Paul, you got this? I can help answer that. When we started talking about avant-garde, we were thinking about what are we starting with? We're starting with Vanguard traditionally being red and green, and what the avant-garde version of that could be. And so going a neon route with that. And white is always a great color for the performers because you can see everything that they're doing. And that's something that we take pride in. So starting with the white in the performers, and then using those neon colors and textures in the guard costume then throughout the show was inspiring to us from a traditional Vanguard state.
And I do want to shout out another design team member, Michael Rosales, who the last couple of years, he's been on the team for years, but the last couple of years he's come into his own and started designing the uniform for everything you see out there. So, and doing fantastic work.
Well, and I was going to say too, just the choreography piece. I think one of the greatest things about this program is the speed of the music, the speed of the percussion writing, the speed of the drill. But when they are engaged in terms of just individual choreography and the layers of the choreography, that's an art form unto itself with what you guys have done with this. There's so many things happening. I think I watched the video like 3 or 4 times over the weekend because I couldn't catch it all on one look. It's just so much going on so much of the time. And I hope you're getting that feedback from those who are evaluating this summer, because there is a lot of what.
There's
and,
a lot of, David, I think, and, we've worked together in the past, so, but it's one of those where, especially Andy and I have this need, I suppose, to keep digging deeper with layers, and something that I've kind of coined the term micro composition within a moment. Not just about error-free design execution, but
Right.
rather digging into the layers and the depth and creating those micro compositions where, when you first lay it out there, don't stop there. There's so much more
Right.
to dig into. And so I think that's part of that, is what you're seeing us trying to take that next step with the micro composition, and not being satisfied with making it aesthetically pleasing.
And from that too, I mean, with avant-garde being something that I'm sure there's a lot of drum corps fans that have to go, what does avant-garde mean? You read the definition of avant-garde, but you guys start right off the bat with a quote from Send in the Clowns. And I think that's a safe zone for a listener that may not understand the complexities of what's happening. But if you get that, and then you hear it again right before the company front at the very, very end of the show, I just think that's really beautiful, that you still give us something that is a carrot of, I call them hidden Mickeys, or we can call them Easter eggs or whatever, but there it is all the way through the show. And it made my ear lean toward that for the entire time of the show. So I was just very intrigued by the way you put that together. Are we going to see or hear more Sondheim?
You mean next year?
No, this year. Is there going to be more of a reveal?
We can't give away all of our secrets.
Yet to be determined.
I think I will say, David, to your point about the circles and the arms and everything, is that we've been inspired by all forms of avant-garde, whether it's art or music or performance art, fashion. And that was one of the things that we wanted to make sure that we included, is the fashion aspect, which is really over-exaggerating portions of the body. And so having the first, starting with the tubes, which are starting with, what do we have? We have the performers and we have the yard lines, and that's all that we have to work with. So zooming in on that yard line and then shifting those around could benefit us. And that's where we started to hone in on how those tubes could be used to define space and really zoom in on them a little bit more. And same thing with the circles. The circles start off as a circle, but then could become a hat. And so that's our version, or our take on avant-garde fashion, is being able to exaggerate portions of the body by using those as props.
It's brilliant. I'm interested, when you guys sat down and talked to the membership, I know the membership have to love this show. You can tell. I mean, their what and the how is really, really strong. But when you sat down and talked to them about the why and the design choices, what was their take on the program?
I can speak to that. I was there with Andy and Paul, and we kind of revealed the show to everybody in Moscow, Idaho. And honestly, I think none of us were totally sure exactly what they would think, because it's a little bit different. And the reception, I kind of exceeded my expectations for sure. I can't speak for everybody else, but it was pretty overwhelming how it was received. And I think it was because we talked a lot about how, the tradition of the drum corps and the meaning of the word vanguard, and sort of being on the leading edge of something, and how that being avant-garde ties directly into that. And it's kind of a celebration of the merging of both of those things. And I think when looking at it from that perspective as a member, it made it made the members excited to know that we're part of, thinking back to all of these iconic Vanguard shows. And David, it's funny, I feel like so many people I talk to that say Santa Clara Vanguard was the first drum corps I ever saw. Like, I've heard that many, many times, and I think that's really special. And I know that people can think back to this show and this show and this thing that happened, and when we changed pants in the tunnel and all these things that sort of pushed what the activity was forward. To talk about it, I think, in those terms to the membership, got them excited about what this could be. And it was just kind of off to the races after that. And they truly, every like weird thing or off the wall thing we asked them to do seemed like they're even more excited to try it as it all went on. So it's even been like an increase in the buy-in, I think, since that day we talked about it.
And that's a risk. I mean, because the activity right now is at a place where it gets more creative every single year. And to say we're going to, exceed that creativity, that's a huge risk, and I think you guys have just done a masterful job. It's redefining for me what Santa Clara has even been. So,
well, thank you,
Tim.
Well, I'm going to ask a more basic question because I talked to you guys last year, and you had the intentional, we're not going to use props and set pieces, and then you came up with the very cool backpacks, right? That were made things available. I'm assuming that is not part of this show, but it seemed to me, Michael, like there was so much space used that the ability for someone to go get something and come back in seemed less of something to have to deal with. Am I reading that right?
Someone had to deal with it.
Well, obviously, of course, but maybe that's it. Maybe you're just doing such a great job with those transitions and stuff. But like, you know what I mean? Like, there's not something on somebody where they take it off like last year, right?
Correct. And we did discuss that and decided that we would go without that particular device for this year, the functionality of that, and try to be more bold with how we do the equipment changes, a little bit maybe smarter at times. But to your point, there are options because we are using every inch of that field. I think is what you're getting at, is that there are more opportunities on various perimeters in which to do some of those equipment transitions, etc. There's a few sleight of hand things that happen as well. But it was definitely approached in a different way, not having that logistical device this year.
So would you be willing to give me an example of something you had, because transitions are so hard for everybody, and we've all seen the horrible run for fabric many times. So like, can you give me an example of something in the show that we could watch for, like where you were like, oh man, I figured this out and nobody's going to see this coming? Or can you give me an example?
Well, Tim, if I tell you, then they're going to see it coming.
Well, if they're interested enough to watch this,
as a magician, reveal his trick. No, there's various times throughout. Obviously, one of the times we took advantage of was when we did open up the entire field, where you had the upper brass and middle voices in the front corner, you had the lower voices in the back corner. At the end of that moment, we did utilize that time to where, because at that point, when you're in the corners, you're on two different perimeters. So you have, half the people are near the perimeter where they can pick up something right there without people seeing it and feed in from the corner, as opposed to, we didn't go to the corner to change equipment. We went to the corner for an effect. While we were there, we were able to capitalize on that and do those logistical type things as effects, as opposed to as the monotony of running for the fabric.
One of those moments for me was when you had the two performers in the middle of that and they pulled the fabric apart and then it broke apart. That was unexpected to me. I thought we were going to stretch fabric from one end to the X and then it popped in the middle. So that was one for me.
There are some places also where the brass performers are bringing the tubes to a different place in the field, or there's a section of brass that are carrying the circles that are condensed to open them up in a different area of the field. So it's crucial that everyone is on the field, or else people are not going to get their equipment. Even at the beginning of the show, when people start pulling their instruments from the center sculpture, none of them are picking up their instrument. They're picking up someone's instrument, setting it down somewhere, moving, doing their choreography. Eventually they get to their instrument, but without everyone there, it's nearly impossible for the performance to even happen.
I'd like to throw it to Evan and Paul too, with the space that you're playing with, and the environment. I've got that on my list as a big thing, because this has to be a timing and balance nightmare in some places with the space that you're playing with. Can you guys talk a little bit about your scoring and how many iterations did you go through in spring training that may have affected that because of the space and the environment challenges?
Well, I'm not gonna hopefully disappoint you with the answer, but I really do think Mike and the visual design in general is so well thought out that there's not a whole lot of like, let's get it out there and, oh wow, this doesn't work. I don't think there's any of that. There's one moment it's kind of a crazy thing. To this day, I still find it impossible for them to do it, but they actually can do it. They actually multo retard a double stroke roll, but they march quarter notes and expand the form backwards.
Oh, wow.
And I'm thinking Mike's setting them up like 1984, right? And just like we're gonna arc it up and do that. And when I saw it, I was like, oh, and I immediately thought, okay, I'm gonna have to rethink this. And then the players just, like Evan was saying, just like took on the challenge and really found that to be an interesting, exciting, like, oh yeah, moment where let's see if we can do this. And I don't know if there's a whole lot. I mean, Evan can speak to the whole ensemble about this, but I don't know there's that many moments where we're just rethinking everything. And I mean, like, for example, the beautiful sort of bow theremin section in the middle of the ballad, that was original. That's all part of what we had planned, and it all was interpreted through Mike and Andy and Michael, and just you know what I mean? They really sort of heard that and interpreted it, and it turned out perfectly. So there's not a whole lot of like, let's start over from our point of view.
Yeah, I mean, there certainly are moments of challenge where we have to work to play together, but there's something about the way that Andy and Michael put together the visual product that even when we have those challenges, they do it in the absolutely most palatable way possible, and it's always worth it. And there's also things that we plan in from the very beginning, like the ballad segment that Michael referred to, where we have the high brass in one corner and the low brass in another. Well, we knew we wanted to explore a scenario like that in the ballad. So all the way back to the first layers of musical construction, it was written in a way to where we could have a little gray in the way that the things interacted with the various things in the field, and that would work in the context of what we were trying to portray in those moments. So, but it's always very, very calculated, and it is challenging sometimes. But when you work with some of the greatest visual designers that have ever done it, it always comes across. It always goes down way smoother than it may seem when you view it. And it all has complexities and layers.
One of the things we have at this.
Go ahead, Paul. I will say it's a lot harder. I mean, I don't want to make light of it. It's way harder than what we've done in the past. And I think part of the issue is that we run into if they pull it off and it seems really easy, it's very lyrical and connected and smooth, and it seems like it was nothing but a thing. But it's like an enormous amount of rehearsal and practice and teaching how to listen to timing and honestly, we're also benefited from great drum majors, and that's really interesting is how our drum major, I can simply talk to her alone, by herself, or her and the assistant drum major, and they can correct things just simply as a conductor, which is really nice to have.
It's very mature, right? So one of the things we haven't discussed is the role of the color guard. Can we talk about the role of the color guard in this and how they bridge not only the concept, but the musical identity of the performance to the concept? What's your thoughts on that?
I feel like the role of the color guard this year is unique because when we start talking about the pacing of the show, I remember talking about texture and having the episodes be inspired by texture. And when we look at the guard in the well, first of all, the guard really stands out from the drum corps. So seeing the contrast between them and the drum corps and seeing how they work together, I think is unique. Also in the pairing with the brass, there is a lot of weight share, and so you can see that really clearly. Their faces are covered for the first portion of the show, as well as the brass, and um, that's really more about mood. That whole section of the show is really all about intrigue and what is this sculpture in the middle of the field? And as I peel it apart, that sculpture then comes to life. Um, their role changes throughout the show. That matches the intensity or texture of what's happening. They go into the piece with the circles is super playful. They end up using their props as hats, which then changes their personality at that point.
Mm-hmm.
And as it goes through, it becomes nostalgic when we hear "Send in the Clowns." But one of the things about this show that we were inspired by is avant-garde performance art, which is known for not having a clear narrative intentionally, so that we're able to go through the show not linearly, but be able to explore different places and zoom in and stay there for a while and then come back again, but really being inspired by texture and mood. Even though there is not a specific character, and it would be easy for us to say you are this thing, and then we're sort of trapped in that corner of being that character, whatever that is throughout the whole show. This allows them to open up and explore within each episode what that texture, what that mood still feels like. And I still feel like we get a great range and of arc of mood from the performers throughout each section.
And that explains, to Michael's point, a lot of the micro stuff, those micro details, those micro moments, the episodes that you're talking about, how that becomes even more prolific, I think, throughout the time of the show.
And I think the color guard also is so important, especially due to the high contrast within that composition, because it allows me to frame what is important or to create a counterbalance to something or to lead the eye. There's just so many things you can do with that contrast, both in terms of the costuming as well as the fabric of the flags, etc. And also the hats that Andy mentioned. We were able to use them as mini spotlights. Obviously, in this activity, we don't have the advantage of lighting, but we were able to utilize them in multiple ways to create these spotlights for our soloists, etc. Throughout. So just having those multi-purposes for utilizing all aspects, I suppose, of the costuming.
So we talked a little bit at the beginning of this about silence, both musical and visual silence. And I'd like to go back to that because I think one of the things as a musician that we all know happens, that all sound comes from silence, but silence in itself is really a sound also. It's just, something that's quiet, right? So how do we become a little bit more aware of that silence? And what are you telling people? What is the judging community saying to you about that silence? Are people recognizing that? Because it's not uncomfortable silence. It's almost like pre-planned, intentional silence that flips the page to the next episode or the next, micro moment that you're creating. So can we talk a little bit about the silence portion of this?
I think that was one of the first things that we all talked about in terms of creating enough space and time to do things and let a moment have its like full value of time. And in drum corps, we're constantly under pressure to do things and to sort of fill criteria and demonstrate that we play well, and usually that silence is the first thing to go. It's and then everything seems like a little bit of a rush, like a circus act. Everything's happening all at once, and we're trying to get as much credit as possible. And I don't mean to get philosophical here, but like we all have done this long enough that I think we're beyond the point of we're trying to write things that we're guessing that people will like. And I think we're really truly tapping into stuff that we like. We like this show. every piece that we picked in the show, I think, has an element that is special. Like each piece is different, but I think as we pick the pieces, it always contains something that pulls you in. It can be different for every piece, but there's got to be that element of something that pulls you in. And part of the silence is sort of at least for me personally, it was a recital that I did with George Crumb's music, and we played an amplified flute solo with three percussionists called Idol of the Misbegotten. And the way that piece starts, honestly, I honestly felt this way on stage when I was doing it, as it was so profound that I could hear people actually breathing in the audience. And I thought to myself, in the moment, in the concert, I thought, now that's effect. You know what I mean? That is effective. I think that I feel a certain way when I play that and when I hear that. And then, I played it for the guys that Evan took it, and we took kind of a piece of the beginning of that and sort of just inspired and just try to capture that moment without really necessarily just arranging the verbatim piece. And so I think a lot of the silence that you hear throughout the piece is a result of different kinds of moments like that require space. So.
And I love the fact that silence hits the entire triad of effect. I mean, it's an emotional response, it's an intellectual response, and an aesthetic response, all in one. Not playing anything, tacit is a response. So I think that's just it's interesting the way you play with it, especially with the environmental things that you're doing visually. That opens up, you actually see the silence, which is hard to do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm not going to talk too much here, but the first rippling effect visually, I thought that one of the first responses that we got was that the music is not fast. You know what I mean? And that surprised me when I heard somebody say that. I was like, well, that's not at all what we were thinking. We were thinking that the silence and the drop of the note causes that ripple, and one thing affects another. And I thought that was another interesting thing about our show, is that things don't necessarily automatically pair up like that. So
yeah, it's the pebble in the water thing, right? You get the ripple effect, and that's it. So,
and it's interesting that you had mentioned the triad of effects too, because as part of the micro composition, it's the words in the name, composition, but we're also exploring that exactly what you're talking about, the emotional complexity. One of the I don't want to say overused, but most commonly used effects in drum corps is the wow crowd pleasing moments, right? And we have to have them, but in an effort to explore new frontiers emotionally, we do have to dig into that emotional complexity and sometimes do things that ask questions instead of throw those exclamation points.
Great perspective. Yep.
The last thing I'd say on that is the silence also inherently makes it so that the not silence is even more striking, and it sets up the other moments even that much more significantly. And I think that trying to find as much variety and like just juxtaposition of musical and visual ideas kind of close to each other was a big inspiration for what we were digging into, and silence was kind of the natural way to create some of those effects.
And they're not naturally telegraphed in this performance either. There's a lot of subtlety, but there's a lot of subito that out of nowhere the silence happens or the triple F happens. And I'm sure that's by design, because from sound comes silence, from silence comes sound. So I think it's a brilliant vehicle that you use in that.
Thank you.
So Evan, you are working in Send in the Clowns to all of this other complicated music. That seems very intimidating to me as an arranger. Did you find that intimidating? Like, how many?
Honestly, that was the part that was more familiar to me.
Okay.
All of our repertoire, I think, has elements about it that come across as unfamiliar to the average listener. So, a lot of times having those motifs that we could return to helped us keep in balance the level of things that were familiar and things that are unfamiliar, which I think is important. Obviously this show leans far into unfamiliar things intentionally. But as we go through the show, it was always honestly a relief for me to feel like there was an opportunity after a period of we've challenged folks for a while. Let me give a guidepost in here to grab onto as we turn the corner into the next idea that is going to make people uncomfortable, right? And in that way, I think trying to strike that balance, and it does change and evolve as the show progresses and interacts with the various different layers that are happening at any given time in different ways. But having that thing to grab onto, I think, is helpful. In addition to, I think, it having a special meaning for different individuals who've been associated with the core over time and today. So very useful to me, and it was sort of honestly one of the more fun parts of putting it whenever I found a great opportunity where I could place it in a way that was not so obvious, but hopefully obvious enough for people to catch it. It was exciting to work on that part of the project for sure.
Well, it's the Vanguard, the known Vanguard in the avant-garde. I mean, it allows the audience to feel more aware, maybe a little bit more, like you said, years of Vanguard fans are a little bit more informed, and it makes you feel smarter that I get what you're doing. So that's for the younger Vanguard fans, unless they stay after and hear Send in the Clowns, it might be a little bit of a stretch for them. But for us old guys, I somewhere Gail Royer is giving you the nod right now, so that's pretty cool. So.
Did the visual side think of that as well? Familiar signposts to guide people through the less familiar?
That's an interesting question. I would have to think about that. I think part of it might be just instinctual. You have contrast, you have resolution, just in I don't know if it's instinctual, but as part of the design process, right? So I think that those kinds of aesthetically resolving moments will always, the familiar will make someone feel more at ease than something that's a little bit crazy, like, okay, what's going on here? But when you bring something to a resolution that's in an aesthetically pleasing form, picture, texture, that's always going to set someone at ease, or at the very least, bring that resolution to an understanding of what just happened.
Dan, from the program coordinator standpoint, what challenges did you have when you have these masterminds on this team and everybody's got really great ideas about how you put this thing together that no one's done before, and it's out there in terms of complexity and sophistication? What were your challenges as far as saying, yeah, we'll use that one, or let's talk about this one more?
And I mean, the first thing I'd say, and I say this like a broken record, but like I feel like I pinch myself in this role working with the people on this call and the people that aren't here that are on the design team, because it's I mean, I learn something new every meeting that we have, and it's inspiring. And in terms of challenges, I mean, I don't really know. That's a hard question to answer. I think that everybody is really collaborative. I've been part of design teams where everyone is very much siloed in their lane and will fight for their lane, but maybe in a way that's going to be to the detriment of the overall product. And I have to say that is the opposite of the case with this team. I mean, I think everyone is obviously very passionate about what they do and how they create, and they're part of the process, but it's always to serve the greater good. And if there's ever a time where it maybe feels that like it's not, or somebody has a different thought, it's always something we can discuss openly without any type of, I don't want to say ego, but that's kind of it. There's a great quote that's like, it's amazing how much you can accomplish if you don't care who gets the credit. And I feel like that really is this design team in a nutshell. And the fact that, I think even just coming on here and wanting to represent as many of us as we can, and we'd bring on more if we could, like, that's just the ethos of this team, I think. And so that makes all of it way more enjoyable. And, when people have been doing things for a long time, myself excluded from this, obviously, I think it can be easier to be burnt out or be resentful of the process. And I don't feel that even 1% with these people. So, I know you asked me what the challenges were, and I told you what all the challenges were not, but that's an honest answer. So,
Well, I think you see it in the composition too. I think, back to the triad effect. I don't get wrapped up in the emotional, intellectual, and aesthetic, but I think of it more as think it, feel it, see it as the triad. And I think you feel that in this performance. I think it's there, like in terms of the way it was put together. It's a quilt. It doesn't feel like it's elements. It feels like it's a quilt. And I think that's to your great communication and putting something like this together that it really, really works.
Thank you.
All right, so we probably need to start wrapping this up because you all are very busy, and I appreciate you stopping to take time to do this. I'm going to go around and let each of you say one thing you want to say about the show, the season, the core, your job with it, whatever you want to say. I'm going to say first off to anybody that's watching this that when they're describing the beginning of the show where everybody's taking each other's instruments and moving into places and they're handing stuff off, don't do this at home. This is like high level professional stuff. This is one of those things that you do. Don't do this with your band, everybody. Okay, this is like super high level sophisticated stuff. No offense to anybody, but nobody grabs anything that's not theirs in the shows I write because that's just most bands, right? So anyway, it's super impressive when you describe that, and I can't wait to watch it again and look for even more of that. But I just felt like I had to say that. So Andy, I'll let you go first. What would you like to say, sort of wrapping up? Any message you want to share?
What I've enjoyed so far this year is really watching the audience and watching them lean in and look around and not constantly applauding every 15 seconds, 30 seconds. It's very rewarding to see people take something in and wait until the end of it. And I really feel like this is a 12.5-minute piece versus segments, and then giving it up for the performers at the end. I've really appreciated the quiet from commentary from people too, from peers and judges alike, because that means that they're interested and invested in what's happening. So that's been very rewarding, and really seeing the design team, not here, but the teachers, the choreographers, the technicians really dig into it and really invest themselves into it. So far, it's just been really wonderful this season.
That's wonderful, and I have to interject my own personal thing here because when I was in the regiment in the early 80s and we were doing the Spartacus for the first time, and it was so different. And like that was one of the comments that the Corps kept getting, was that people weren't clapping. They were all sort of leaning in and watching. And I feel like that's a great compliment. So if you're feeling that, I don't know, that's my association with it from my history. Evan, what would you like to say in closing?
I'll say kind of a geeky specific thing that we haven't talked about, but I think is one of the most interesting things that we have going on musically. And it's these little boxes in the front ensemble that are called apprehension engines that Paul can probably speak to this more, and I think that he should here for a moment. But there are these boxes that have all these odds and ends on them. And Paul actually worked with one of our audio leads, Luke Vogt, on getting them. We built them ourselves. It's sort of an instrument that's used in Hollywood for a lot of horror soundtracks. And I remember Paul showing me a video of one of these. It had to have been 4 or 5 years ago in a design meeting early on. And I remember thinking, Paul, this is insane, and this will never work. I can't imagine this, how could this possibly work? And I think it is one of the coolest things. And a lot of the things that you hear that are typically sound design in a lot of, marching art shows are actually being created live by these performers, these three marimba players. Paul, I don't know if you want to speak to any more specifics about it, but I just think it's one of the coolest little wrinkles in our show musically.
Obviously with percussion, we have an advantage of we can play pretty much anything that is put out there. Technically you can play it as a percussion instrument, but I was at home and watching the series on Apple TV. It's called Servant or The Servant. I can't remember which one it was. And the whole soundtrack was just so it made you feel something immediately. Like in seconds, you felt like this mood changed drastically because of this machine they used. And I thought it would be great. We have a fantastic sound designer, Dave Isaacs. He's very tasteful and he leaves a lot of room, and he's very conversational when it comes to like writing things with other things. And I think that's the element that I wanted to get, is like I'd like to see players play things. You know what I mean? I want to see them actually make the sound instead of, unfortunately, like a keyboard is oftentimes hidden behind, a big the actual case or the cart for the keyboard, and it's tough to see them play. And so I think that actually seeing the interaction between the players, creating sounds of the game in an improvised way, I thought was interesting, and I would just enjoy seeing that, and just sort of gave Luke. Luke's a band director, and he's got band dads. He's got people to help him, which oftentimes we don't. And so I just called Luke up and I just put it out there and I showed him the video. I said, "Can we get like 3 of those?" and he just didn't say anything right away and just was silent, and then went back, and I evidently has some really engineer type parents, and before you know it, we really didn't hear too much, right, Evan? We didn't hear like a lot about the progress, and then all of a sudden Luke sends me a video of like the demo of this thing, and it's pretty spot on. I mean, it's exactly like the professional versions of these things, and they just create. I mean, it's the sounds are always different, and they're always hard to pick out, but you can see somebody play it, and you can associate that with the sound and how that interacts with the sound design, and then with the actual visual element on the field. I think it's just more of a natural way to hear that stuff. So.
Can you say more about what it is? Like, it's a box with stuff in it? Like,
Right.
I still don't understand.
It's an empty box made out of wood, and so that's the resonating chamber is the box, and the microphone, the contact microphone, is recording inside the box, and so it's got all sorts of little things on it that you can bow or strike. It's got like a really thin strip of metal, like 3 or 4 of those. It's got a violin string. It's got a crank that actually scrapes the string, and it's like a Foley instrument almost, but it's not really. It's not really meant to imitate a normal sound. It's a sound effect, like oftentimes that would be sampled. So, but if you have if you ever see the show, or please come by and I'll show them to you. It's really interesting. So,
all right, so everybody watch for these. This is super avant-garde stuff. I think that's so cool. All right, Dan Morrison, what would you like to say?
I'll say 2 quick things. One, and I feel like I'm always plugging this, but you hear the apprehension engines, but you also hear a theremin sound. And I think that some people think that is sampled. That is being performed live by a brilliant performer who's also a marimba player. If you're watching the pit, he's the far left marimba player, and he is like one with the theremin. That thing is like impossibly hard to play. And I think he plays it so well that people assume that it's being just triggered. And it's a really, really vital sound to the show. It's electronics, and it's tricky sometimes when they don't work exactly how you want them to, and if that's ever not there or not as present, to me personally, it's like, we're missing that layer. But when it's there, it's very intriguing. So I would highly recommend checking that out and knowing that is being performed live. And the other quick thing that I would just mention, and especially when I got to watch the performance in the Rose Bowl from a good vantage point, which I think our show, taken in from a great vantage point, is it elevates what you're seeing even that much more, just because we use so much of the space. But there's a moment where everyone comes up to the front and they do this really quirky, cool whisper thing. But coming out of that, Paul had this idea to sort of bridge the gap back into reality of the snares start playing on their fingernails. And it's very soft, and it's you almost can't, it's like felt not heard. But when you're watching them do that and you realize what's happening, and then it kind of brings us into the next thing, it took my breath away at the Rose Bowl. I mean, it was like the softest thing that made me get goosebumps I think I've ever experienced. So those 2 things are mine.
We're going to have to add that to the sheet, Paul. That's got to be in some box, right?
I love that. Now, Paul, I didn't give you a chance to make your final comment, so I'll do that now. What would you like to say?
Well, I think there's so many things about the show that I love. I truly love the show. I honestly never get tired of hearing it. I always find something new in it, and I just am fascinated with the way we work on it. I like the fact that we sort of play around with pitches a little bit. One of the commitments that we made was like, there was the ballad we found, and I remember thinking that wouldn't this sound great if we really had like a bowed moment. Like there's a lot of people that use bows throughout the years. We've even tried, but it's always gone so far under the radar that honestly it doesn't add very much to it. It's very hidden. If you know it's there, then you'll know it's there. But we tried to do it in a really overt way. That is, you cannot miss the fact that we use it. I remember getting, I think we have 15 or 20 bows, or some crazy amount of bows. And I remember just like getting all these bows and sort of, symbolically handing them to Sandy and saying, okay, this is what we're going to use for the beginning, for this section of the ballad. And her just kind of looking at me like, really, and so just forcing the orchestrational issue like that has been a lot of fun, just working on things, and just to see what happens, see like, we really want to make this overt so nobody can miss it. And so how do we do that in a tasteful musical way? And then combined with the theremin, it gives this really weird, surreal, pitch bendy sort of feeling in our show. And I think that adds also to the concept tremendously. But, a lot of fun is, to reiterate what some other people said, it's just fun to be working with these people, with the technicians that we have and the sound people we have, and the people running the ensemble rehearsal. I mean, there's such great people that we've all sort of completely bought. We completely are headed in the same direction. We all see the world the same way in terms of this show, and that's what I think is so powerful that you can't miss it. Really, I'm just happy about it. So that's my takeaway.
Great.
You and Sandy are such an interesting couple. I just think, every time I get to talk to you guys, it's so much fun. Like, how many wives would be like, you're handing me all these bows? Anyway, I don't know. I don't know why that struck me as funny. Michael Gaines, what would you like to say as we're wrapping this up?
I think where my mind goes is these performers in this show are tapping into something. And I can't quite put my finger on it, but, throughout at least my career, I know there's been shows that have been good, and then there's been shows that have been very special. And I feel like this is tapping into something special, whatever that is. And I'm very grateful that so many people around the community, people that teach other drum corps, have reached out to express that it's tapping into something emotionally for them, intellectually for them, whatever it is. People that have been an inspiration to me, certainly throughout my career. And that's just so gratifying when, you can create something that really taps into the emotions of your peers, people who do the same things that you do, people who've been around a long time, and you can make them excited again. And I think that's really gratifying.
Yeah, well, what better compliment could you get?
That's great.
David Starnes, thank you for being here to ask all these great questions. Anything you want to say as we're wrapping up?
Well, the design team is phenomenal, and Santa Clara Vanguard. I want to say the people that aren't on this call that can't be here, that's the engine behind this, are those special performers, those 150 people that make this whole thing come to life. We've all been on design teams. And I've said it a million times, you can create the greatest what on the planet, but if you don't have the how to do it, it doesn't matter. And obviously, there's some incredibly talented members in this edition of the Santa Clara Vanguard. And hats off to them, no pun intended, for the visual team, but just amazing commitment and trust, I would say, to out there design that they're going to bring to life. And I agree with you, Michael. I think this show looks different today than it did 2 weeks ago, and it'll look different 3 weeks from now because how organic you guys have laid the groundwork for this as a blueprint. So kudos to you guys, kudos to the team, and all those incredible instructors that are on the ground with them every single day.
Well, thank you guys for taking time to do this in the middle of your busy season. Really, really interesting conversation. Can't wait to share it. So thank you all, and good luck the rest of the season.
Thank you.
Marching Arts Education is the home of the Marching Roundtable podcast. We give you access to the top marching arts professionals through live webinars, podcasts, videos, interviews, and online coursework. With over 1,000 podcasts and hundreds of webinars and videos, there are hours of great professional development for you and your staff. Imagine what you could do with so many great new ideas from the top professionals in our activity. Subscribe to our YouTube channel and sign up for our newsletter to find out about the latest podcasts, webinars, and new content. Find all of this and sign up at marchingartseducation.com.